What's up, guys? Dylon here, and today we're going to talk about should you buy Bitcoin at the top? And by top, I mean $70,000 top. So, like this video, comment, share, subscribe, and let's get into this controversial topic. So, should you buy Bitcoin at $70,000? I don't know. I don't know you. This isn't specific financial advice. This is not financial advice at all. This is for educational purposes only. And you shouldn't take anything I say seriously because I'm just some guy on the internet, and you should do your own research. So, now that we got that way, hypothetically, if I was having a conversation with someone who is curious about buying Bitcoin right now, when it's at $70,000, basically the all-time fiat high of Bitcoin, there'd be a lot of factors to consider. And so I'm going to go over a few of those factors to maybe give you a better understanding and point you in a few directions that you can potentially go if you're in the camp of, asking, should I buy Bitcoin now? So if you have no Bitcoin, zero, zilch, you've never bought it before, I think you should buy Bitcoin, right? I think you should buy enough Bitcoin. You don't have to spend a lot of money, right? I think you can buy as little as like $10, maybe even less, and go through the process of figuring out what exchange to buy it on, figuring out how to bank account, right? Or if you don't have a bank account, finding a Bitcoin ATM, something like that, and go through the process of buying it, exchanging fiat dollars for Bitcoin, and then go through the process of transferring that Bitcoin to a wallet that you can self-custody. And so my recommendations, but the free, right, are hot wallets. You have things like the Exodus wallet, Trust Wallet, Blue Wallet, those type of things you can use to store Bitcoin. There's a plethora of other wallets that you can use. That I like the Ballet wallet. That's a good one. The Trezor is a good hardware wallet. Cold Card. There's so many of them. So going through that process and learning about those and setting one up and sending the Bitcoin from an exchange to a wallet, I think is highly educational. And I think you should do that, right? Because my biggest regret when it comes to Bitcoin is that I didn't actually go through that process I just explained. All I did was listen to someone on the internet, read some articles, things like that. When I first heard about Bitcoin and decided to seriously actually look into it, and I stumbled across someone like Peter Schiff. And back in this is like 2013 to 2015, probably I think it was like 2015 when I did this. And back, you're more likely to run into negative press and negative articles. And just because it was a lot younger, a lot earlier on, by just looking at it, it was a lot likely to survive versus looking at it now. It was a lot more risk there. It was definitely the new kid on the block back then, even though I had been around for about 6 years, 5-6 years. So it was much easier to find someone who was saying, it's never going to last. It's a fad. It's a trend, right? Because time wasn't on its side and they were established. And, Peter Schiff was on all the media channels and he sounded smart. And, he was an investment manager and successful and all these things. He looked like a guy that you should listen to and that probably knew more than like your drug dealer friend that's like, yo, you should get some Bitcoin, right? That was how it was back in the day. And had I actually really done my own research versus just outsourcing it to others and just kind of passively listening, if I had actively done the research and actively read about Bitcoin and actively bought some and moved it, right? Like I mentioned, I would have actually had Bitcoin back then and might be having a very different conversation today. I would have bought Bitcoin earlier for a lot less money. But since I didn't do that, I bought Bitcoin much later. And so that was one of my biggest regrets. And so if you're here listening to that video, and if you haven't done that, I implore you, obviously not specific advice or anything like that, but go do that, right? Your future self will thank you because at least you're making an informed decision whether or not it's something you want to be involved with or not. Because then if you look back and you say, hey, look, I tried it out. It wasn't for me. It was weird. But at least you tried it out and you got that information. But if you don't do that, then you'll never know. And in the future, if you hear about Bitcoin again and you come across my channel, I'm having the same conversation and Bitcoin's at 100,000, 200,000, maybe $1 million. And I'm saying, hey, should you buy Bitcoin here at the top at $1 million? Right? You're like, oh my gosh, I remember this random guy on the internet I listened to when he was talking about it at 70K. Boy, I wish I would have bought some then, right? I don't want you to have that regret. I'd rather you have the regret of saying, maybe in 5 years from now, maybe it's less, right? Bitcoin's at a couple $100,000 and you're looking back, you're like, man, I'm glad I bought some at 70K, but I wish I would have bought more, right? I wish the much better regret to have. At least you bought some, because that's how I bought some, but I wish I would have bought more. So that's what I say for you. If you don't have any Bitcoin, you've never bought any or anything like that, go and do that. Now, so let's say you have bought some, or you thought about it and you're convinced on buying some, and you have maybe a little bit more money that you want to put into it, and you're trying to figure out when is the best time to buy, right? Because we are at an all-time high. Okay, we are at 70,000. I think 98% of people in Bitcoin are in profits. So what that means is a pullback is probably on the horizon, potentially. We're in uncharted territory, though, right? Bitcoin was this big kind of grassroots, like, rebellious movement, and for all these past years, but everything changed in January when we got the spot ETF, right? It's mainstream, right? It's gone mainstream, and the floodgates are starting to open to massive pools of capital and massive demand that couldn't necessarily get involved with Bitcoin before. And so that could dramatically change the growth path of this asset. Because traditionally, Bitcoin's gone through these 4-year cycles. And, it's gone up and peaked and then back down and, consolidated and then went up and peaked every 4 years. It generally does that, and it's around an event, which is more or less priced in, but it's not a surprise to anyone. We can talk about having it in another video. It is important. It is important to understand that. But basically, Bitcoin goes up and then it comes down. And so last time, it was a couple of years ago, it hit $69,000 and then went back down to like $17,000, and now it's worked its way back up to $70,000, right? It's gotten here at an unprecedented rate, faster than anyone thought it would get here. So that's new. That's surprising. But if you look at history, it's gone through these cycles. And so, you look at previous cycle tops, and then you look at the new lows. And so the cycle top before the last one was like around $20,000, and Bitcoin went down to 20 and went below $20,000 after it was up at 69. Okay. And so same situation, went down. Now it's back up at 70, go back down, and it probably will go down, back down below 70. But if we have this phase shift up, maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is the new bottom. So when you're sitting here at 70K, even though it was at a previous all-time high, you have to think that because of the timing in the cycle, because of all the demand, ETF, because of how people are understanding Bitcoin, all that's very bullish for it. And so this could be a new bottom for Bitcoin. This could be a new level where man, I wish I would have bought 70K. Okay, that's one thing to take. Okay, that's more of my perspective. That's a bullish long-term perspective. The other thing to consider is that the saying is no one has ever lost money in Bitcoin for if they've held it for longer than 4 years. And so, let's say this is a top. Okay, chances are we're going to go higher this cycle. That's more likely than not. So chances are this isn't. Maybe it's a local top and we dip down for a little bit. Okay, but even if it were the top of this cycle, again, history has said that anyone who's held Bitcoin for 4+ years is in profit, and it's proven to be correct. So even if you bought it at the top right now, if you have a longer term time horizon and it's capital that you could allocate for that time horizon, and you expect for it to not necessarily yield any sort of major returns over the next 4 years, then it's not really that big of a deal, right? And then in the case that this is maybe closer to the cycle bottom, right, or the new cycle bottom, when Bitcoin goes and hits its real peak, which could potentially be in the $180,000 to $250,000 range or more, well, then you're not going to be really disappointed about buying some at 70. You're just going to wish that you had heard about it earlier and bought some sooner. So in all those scenarios, if you have zero Bitcoin, I think you should buy some just to figure out if you want to put more money in. If you're thinking about putting more money in, buying some now isn't a bad idea. I don't think you should ape everything into it because that might cause you some stress, but maybe put some and then save some on the side so you can dollar cost average in. So we do get some dips. And last cycle, I think we had like 15 to 20 corrections in the cycle of greater than 20%. So you could just allocate some now and then just wait for those corrections, right? Whenever there's a big correction in the market, given that the indicators and everything's still saying we're in this bullish trend, allocate some more capital. Then at least your bags aren't dry. At least you have some dry powder that you can continue to allocate to Bitcoin. So the way that would look is say like you're doing a reasonable number for some people. Say it's $10,000. You can put $5,000 in, right? And then the rest of the $5,000 you can say I'm going to $100, $100, a week, or $100, maybe you want to do $100 a day, right? But maybe it's less. Maybe it's, hey, $20 a day, right? And then when there's a big dip, I'll buy $100 worth or $200 worth or $500 worth. I'll have some bulk to buy. That'd be a simple strategy, and then you can deploy those funds. And the general recommendation is, of course, not financial advice, is that individuals allocate 1 to 5% of their portfolio to something like Bitcoin, because worst case, you lose 1 to 5%. Obviously, that's not good, but a 95% on a test is still passing. Okay, you'll probably be all right. It won't cause financial ruin if you lose 5% of your portfolio. So obviously, this all depends on what your portfolio is, what type of investing you're doing, and how much money you have to spare and everything like that, obviously. But if you got 100 grand, right, that'd be between $1,000 and $5,000. Now, I think people should have more than that in Bitcoin, but that would be the more conservative approach. Okay, so it'd be $1,000 to $5,000 would be how much you put in. If you got $1 million, right, you'd be putting 10 to 50K into Bitcoin if you're at that 1 to 5% range. Now, that's the conservative thing. I know banks are allowed to have up to 2% exposure to the crypto industry. So, that's the most conservative. If you're less conservative, well, put as much in as you want, right? I think Bitcoin is one of the greatest assets ever and has been the best performing asset over the past 14 years. And I think is only going to continue to go up over time and become more valuable and more useful, and there's going to be more demand for it. And because there's a fixed supply, I think when we're looking at prices like 70K versus 50K versus 30K, right, versus 100K, yeah, that decent differences in those prices, but that in the future we're going to be comparing it to $1 million plus. And of all those prices, if I said you could pay 100K to get $1 million, would you do it? Yes, you would. If you could do a 70, yeah, of course you would. If you do 50, of course you would, right? You would pay 200. Okay, people would pay $500,000 to get $1 million. All of those make sense, right? All of those would be amazing returns. And it's not just the numerical value of it, which we can talk about in another video. It's the fact that you now hold one of the most scarce assets on the face of the earth. It has absolute scarcity. There will never be more than 21 million. By holding one Bitcoin, being able to self-custody that and control that, right? You hold 1/21 millionth of the entire Bitcoin network. So all the demand that comes into Bitcoin, right? You have a percentage of that, 1/21 millionth. And because some Bitcoin have been lost, right? Satoshi's got $1 million in his wallet. Some dude's got his computer or thumb drive in a landfill. Someone, a bunch of people had boating accidents, myself included. There's a lot of Bitcoin that isn't in circulation and can't be accessed and will never be in circulation again. And given the institutional demand for it via their ETFs, they need to have Bitcoin. They need to buy Bitcoin, okay? Because their ETFs are backed by Bitcoin, and so they have to have Bitcoin on hand to back the ETFs. So you now have an institutional player that is required to basically buy it. And there's going to be more and more of those in the future. So there's going to be this constant demand for this thing that there isn't enough of. And there are numbers and projections out there that Bitcoin will dry up. The exchanges won't be able to supply Bitcoin at the current rate that is being bought up in about 6 to 18 months, depending on the rate of growth. So that means that all the Bitcoin, right, for the current prices, for the current rate that's being bought up, there won't be enough. There won't be enough Bitcoin out there. And so when that happens, what generally will happen is that you'll have a phase shift up in price. Right? You'll have a God candle. Boom, right? And at that point in time, you'll probably be happy that you bought some at 70K. So just to conclude, none of this is financial advice. I'm just some guy on the internet. Make sure to go out and do your own research, right? And by do your own research, I mean actually buy some and go through the process. Spend some time, spend some money. Your future self will thank you, right? By doing that. Maybe you'll thank me, maybe not. That's all right. I'm just some guy making videos on the internet that likes Bitcoin. But actually do your research and get some. And if you're thinking about buying some, just get off zero. Don't be sitting on the sidelines being like, I'm going to wait for this price. They say time in the market is better than timing the market. And so if you have a chunk of change, right, put some in, then dollar cost average. And of course, think of a way to earn more money if you want to buy more Bitcoin, solve problems in the world. Build a business, buy a business, sell a business, right? Do real things, level up in your career to make more money by adding value to the world around you, and then take some of that value that you've accrued for yourself that's sitting in fiat dollars that are decaying, they're dying, they're losing purchasing power over time, and put them into Bitcoin, right? Because then you don't need to worry about, oh, I put 10 grand in, right? All my 10 grand in, because you just made another 10 grand and now you can put that in, right? So that's be my advice. So go out there, get off zero, okay? Buy some Bitcoin, have a long-term time horizon, do your research, and then go out in the world and solve problems, create value, and then move that value that you create. Stop storing it in fiat things and store it in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has outperformed all the other fiat things since its inception. So that's what I think about should you buy Bitcoin now at 70K, right? It's not a bad idea, especially if you don't have any. So go out there, stack some sats. And again, my goal is, and this is just so, is I want to have more Bitcoin today than I had yesterday and more Bitcoin tomorrow than I have today. And if I continue to do that, even if it's just one sat more, I'm happy and what I'm doing is working. So that's my goal, and maybe that'll be your goal. Let me know what you think about this in the comments.